So now we're going on to Yorkshire Coast David. So we're going to item 2 on this section, motion in respect of the Yorkshire Coast D-bid, and we need to suspend standing order on this one. Shall we have a proposer?
I propose suspending standing orders, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Chatt. All in favour? Against? Right, we're nearly there. Right. Proposer, Councillor Alf Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I submit my motion as read, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Chatt.
Madam Mayor, could I second that motion, please, and reserve?
Thank you. Councillor Colling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose an amendment to that motion. Before I get to the wording, just say a few words, not substantive really. The motion as written is actually overreach. This chamber should recognise that it does not have the authority to request a third party, an independently run organisation, to participate in any investigation. I absolutely agree that the Council should be open to scrutiny and examination of its role in the ballot process. And I do recognise that businesses have some legitimate concerns and require some answers about what actually happened prior to November 2018. I therefore propose the following amendment. Delete the last 7 words of Councillor Abbott's motion, i.e. legitimacy of the Yorkshire Coast bid, and insert the role of Scarborough Borough Council in carrying out the bid ballot, and that Scarborough Borough Council urges the Yorkshire Coast Bid Company to fully participate in that investigation. And that is my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Right.
I second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Chatt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just reading the motion as it stands. Nowhere in there did we mention Scarborough Borough Council. We mentioned the bid process. And that's what we, Alf and I, when we spoke, actually talked about. Changing the wording to Scarborough Borough Council is quite ineffective. Borough Council were not the bid people. They were not the people who got the documentation, put it all together. They were not the ones who did this. This was done by a private company. And this is where the Yorkshire Coast bid people are coming from. I've been to a couple of their meetings now, met with them, spoke to them, and I would say that this motion should fall. Our original motion is very distinct. It's saying that a process should be carried out. I'm aware a further bid or a further appeal has gone to the Secretary of State, which will sort out the evidence of what they've gathered. Members will be aware, because I've sent around an email today, saying what their outcomes have been, all right, which is quite strong and powerful. This is a group of people who have actually got together, funded within themselves, recorded letters to every single property what should have got the original D-bid vote. 57 have been returned as not deliverable. There's been a lot of issues going on about people saying, I didn't know what it was about. The document really does explain it quite well. I'm speaking now on the amendment, not the main motion. So for that reason, I'm going to say to members, I hope that you cannot support this motion. And the only reason being that I don't think that this has anything to do with Scarborough Council. Our part in this has been right and correct. If Councillor Collins knows more information than me saying that hasn't been right and correct, then that would be really good to get into the public domain. But what I'm saying to you is that the business community is saying that they are not coming to Scarborough Borough Council with this. They're saying there should be an impartial investigation. They should be allowed to give evidence, and that should be the way this goes. I think that's correct. Once we shut the D-bid people out, then we're talking between ourselves. That's not what the business community want. The business community want input into this and to give evidence at that investigation. I think that's only fair and right, and I don't see why we can't ask them to take part in this.
Thank you. Councillor Siddons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not trying to be difficult with this, but I read this motion exactly as we said. And it's this council instigate an independent, impartial investigation. I accept the point you're making, Councillor Chatt, that it doesn't say Scarborough Borough Council, but I don't think anyone in this room would think that this council means anything other than Scarborough Borough Council. We're trying to be helpful here. What we don't want this motion to fail. We understand what you're trying to achieve with colleagues who are involved in this, but as you know, we cannot instigate an investigation into a third party. We can ask them to take part in that, and that's what Councillor Collins is asking to review that. I think that the amendment actually makes it easier to deliver the things that you're asking for.
Councillor Kershaw.
I'd just like to welcome Councillor Chapp and Councillor Abbott's motion to look into the DBID. But I would like to support Councillor Collins' amendment to that. There's been too many questions asked about whether people got ballot papers, whether they got business plans, whether they received emails, coming from all sorts of quarters. And so I do think it really needs looking into. And I think the motion as was, as Councillor Chapp mentioned, it's too wide, is that scope. I think that scope needs narrowing down, and I think with Councillor Collins' amendment, that would narrow it down. That said, though, and having been at risk of sounding a bit churlish, this Councillor Abbott and Councillor Chapp gave succour and support to the out-of-touch Conservative administration that actually gifted this to the people of Scarborough. Perhaps if you'd been a little bit more vocal in your opposition at the time, this wouldn't be the case. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other questions? Michelle.
Madam Mayor, can I get some clarification here? Because I don't think the amendment and the motion, I think they're actually closer than people realise. What is the legal advice to the Council about investigating a third party? Now, as I understand it, the bid, I think it was the bid project team, not the bid company as it is now, / Mosaic, there was a process flow between ourselves and them because we conducted the ballot, and that information flowed between the various bodies in accordance with the bid regulations. I do want to speak on the amendment, but could I ask for some clarification as what is the advice? Because if that motion passes as it is unamended, is it something we could actually implement? Because there's no point in passing the motion if we're going to be told in a couple of weeks' time, guys, you can't do it. So can I have some clarification on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, there would be certain degrees of limitation on the material that could be derived from the motion as it originally stands. So you are correct in saying that because the third party is involved. However, there was a process that was undertaken by the Council in conducting the ballot process, which could be looked at from that point of view. Does that help? Thank you.
Any other questions? Do you want to come back?
I think my issue was this, and I've spoken to Councillor Collins about this. My problem is you can't separate the Scarborough Borough Council element out, because the problem is information went from Scarborough Borough Council to the bid project team. It was then sifted, assessed through some decision processes, and then it came back to us for ballots to be issued. I think that pretty much is the case we're in. And so the issue is you can't just say we're looking at Scarborough Borough Council, because actually you're not going to get the whole story here. You need to understand how the information flowed. The issue, how I would say this to it, if I were in the individuals involved in the bid at the moment, given that in less than 5 years' time they will need to come back for a renewal, I think it would be highly naive of them not to cooperate. I know when I've certainly spoken to individuals involved, they believe they've done everything correctly. Now, clearly from the anecdotal evidence that we've had, and it's not just come from campaigners, it has come from so many individuals I've met, there were problems with the number of ballots issued or received, or certainly the understanding of the businesses involved. And as one person pointed out to me over the weekend, is many people with several businesses maybe got 1 or 2 ballots when they should have had more, but the council's got all of their ballots. And that's something, and it's a good point. Maybe if the council had only got 1 ballot, the thing wouldn't have passed. So we have to also bear that in mind. How did that happen? So I'm kind of minded to support the amendment, but I would also like some clarifications on the terms of reference, how they would be set. Would it be possible for outside people, including, say, campaigners, to put forward some suggestions of what might be in those terms of reference, and how could councillors that are not in the executive or not in the leaders group, how could they contribute to that process so that it can be as robust as possible, and that we don't emerge with a report that people say, well, that never answered the questions that I wanted asking. Now, the key to this whole process has got to be fairness. It's got to be fairness to everybody, not just the side you agree with. And that's what I want, is a fair, impartial report, but it starts with getting the terms of reference right and how they would be set. And that's mine.
Councillor Cockerell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We must all be as sick of hearing DBID as we are of hearing Brexit. As we are all well aware, there's been a process that resulted in a majority vote in favour of DBID, and that, in theory, should be an end to discussions. However, doubts have been raised about various aspects of that process. Questions have been asked by concerned people both inside and outside this chamber, and theoretical answers have been provided in every good faith by some colleagues. Nevertheless, doubts are still being raised about the correctness or completeness of the process that was carried out. Suspicions remain as to whether the content of some of the information used for the process was accurate and therefore fit for purpose. The main question in relation to the DBID vote process before us today is, was it conducted properly? In relation to that question, I've acquired the full list of addresses that was used to send out relevant correspondence as part of the process, and this includes the voting papers. Regrettably, and I believe this is fundamental to the discussion today, I can categorically state, certainly in regard to Filey, that not all of the addresses on that list were correct. I can also state that not all of the addresses on that list relate to businesses that were trading at the time of the vote. Consequently, I remain to be convinced that the process used was complete and or accurate. I consider that serious uncertainties remain and they need to be addressed by elected members today. Having the correct list of businesses with a rateable value of over £12,000 is vital to the integrity of the whole DBID process. That list in relation to the relevant businesses within the borough was, I understand, prepared by the Borough Council from records it holds. Accordingly, I believe it is only right and proper that a full, independent, impartial investigation must be undertaken. I don't know if it is possible to implement, within the relevant regulations governing the administration of DBIDs, any motions that might be successful today. Nevertheless, I am of the firm opinion that we should take that route. Furthermore, whether or not this Council agrees to investigate the whole process or just concentrates on the input from the Borough Council, I firmly believe that any actions to collect or enforce payment of the levy should be immediately paused pending the outcome of that same investigation. Therefore, when it is clear on what we are voting, I reserve the right to propose an amendment to the effect unless it has already been incorporated into any motion or amendment. In regard to any investigation, the fundamental questions to be asked are surely very simple. 1. Was the information and or voting documentation sent out to all the correct and current businesses, individuals and organisations? And 2, importantly, were the correct addresses used in each and every case? Finally, the timescale of such an investigation must not be allowed to go on for months and months. The checking of the information on the published list used for the vote against the actual facts is not rocket science and should not take very long, and I see no reason why the overall result cannot be available for our January meeting, if not before. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of responses, if I can, to Councillor Donoghue-Moncrieff. I agree with you around the openness and transparency of any investigation, and I propose that we ask the Chief Executive to engage somebody independent, someone we've not heard of before, so not anybody clearly from Scarborough, but also perhaps from auditing companies we've used before or consultants we've used before, truly independent. And we have our own structures, so that could go to Audit Committee, and Audit could oversee that process. Audit could oversee the terms of reference and the report back. Councillor Cockerell, I'm not sure that would achieve it by January, but it would ensure that it's been heard in public and seen by the right group. Councillor Cockrell, I'd like to thank you for highlighting to me how important it is that we investigate Scarborough Council, because you're absolutely right. We did provide a list of businesses to the bid company, who then sent it back, which formed the basis of the ballot. So we should not be above a Scarborough Council scrutiny of our own processes. Thank you.
Councillor Siddons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I can add to that, in some ways, Councillor Cockrell, I'm surprised that you've asked some of those questions, because you were part of the administration that actually agreed to the process as it progressed. So I would have hoped that you would have asked those questions at the time, rather than 6 or 8 months later.
Councillor Chatt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure that what Councillor Cockrell moved there was an amendment. And if it did, then I would support his amendment, but I would like to further go on that the Yorkshire Coast bid consultation people who have been getting together have actually, I said, sent out letters to all the businesses on the list. Councillor Cockrell's seen now. And of the list, 293 from the 445 who have responded said they have had no contact from the bid company whatsoever. 304 from the 444 who responded said they've not received a business plan on behalf of the company. 412 from the 444 businesses did not attend an information meeting. 251 from the 443 people who responded said they did not get a ballot paper. Madam Mayor, there's a lot gone wrong here, and I'm sorry to say that what we're going to do is blame yesterday. I remember this distinct conversation between the leader at the time was that this was going to go into the Secretary of State and come back to the Council as a decision for us to do. Councillor Siddons yourself was quoted on Yorkshire Coast Radio saying this should not just go through, this should be a Council decision. And that's where I thought we were. Whilst it was in the hands of the Secretary of State, it was an appeal process, and it would not be right or appropriate for us to comment any further on that, and we didn't. But what we did do is, when it came out, we expected it to come back to this Council as a Council decision. The decision then, we were told, was not a Council decision, and if I remember right, Councillor Collins got up and said, "There's been a vote, you've lost, get on with it." And that was reported as well. We had here a group of people who are trying to run a business who were saying that there's a lot wrong with this company. They're saying that there is no annual meeting where they as members can join in. They're saying that they do not have a point where they can get in here. They're feeling really, really put out by this. Now, if we want to support these businesses who do provide jobs, do provide things for our economy, then we need to listen to them. And listen to them, you might say, well, you were on that administration. And I certainly were, and I'm not going to deny that. But now, as a more open and transparent council, should we not be saying to them that these people have a right to come forward, be heard, and show their evidence? I think that is the most important thing here. And I'm sorry, Councillor Siddons, that you sat there looking at me sideways, because for a strange time, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm saying to you that there are people up there in that balcony who've come all the way down today to listen to this. Do we think it's right that a funeral company has to pay a D-bid? Well, maybe not. Guy in the market pulls me and tells me I have to pay 200 quid. Why? And when I explained it to him, he said, but nobody's ever asked me. There's too much gone wrong here. 57% of the papers what were sent out have come back unopened, unanswered. That's the list what Scarborough, the D-bid company have provided. What we're trying to say here, right, let's talk. That's it. I don't want to blame, I want to talk. And it's right that these people should have a chance to have an input into that conversation. And if you see that as wrong, then obviously input, transparency doesn't work. But I support Councillor Cockrell's motion.
Councillor Basterman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No doubt Councillor Chatt will be expecting this gloves off again. If Councillor Chatt is so insistent that this administration is more open and transparent than the last one, then you're in the wrong place, sir.
Councillor Cockrell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to enlighten Councillor Siddons, he doesn't know all the facts, and I did actually raise concern about the correctness and completeness of the list at some meetings well before the 2nd of May.
Councillor Siddons, did you? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure Councillor Bastiman would like me to echo the points he's just made, but unfortunately I'm really pleased that Councillor Chat, who was previously a member of the administration, has admitted to me that actually we are more open and transparent than the previous administration was. Yes, I don't know whether you're looking for a job with us, but you can speak to me afterwards. Thank you.
Did you enjoy that? Councillor Sharma. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam. I'm really quite confused since I wasn't a councillor until 2019. I assume this went through the process, and what I have to deal with is the aftermath of it. I have a funeral director, a post office and a laundrette, all wondering why on earth they are included in it. Now, this is post-decision making, and we have to pick up the pieces and I have to guide them through the process for appealing. But what annoys me is that you are the one bringing a motion forward about a subject that you participated in passing over a long period of time. You weren't just anybody, you were on the cabinet. And within that cabinet, you weren't just nobody, you were there for 8 years. I do not know at the end of that 8-year period in 2009 if there was anybody else who'd been on the cabinet longer than you, apart from Councillor Basterman, who was the leader. I would be very, very... So you can't claim that you weren't aware of things. You were the most informed of anybody. And if during that process you were unable to make these points or even consider these points, I think you have to hold your hand up and say where you went wrong. I would like to know what interventions you made to try and progress this in a more sensible, rational manner so that we didn't have these problems. I think I would like, whatever happens, for that to come out, because I think I am interested in knowing that. And the kind of accusations you make, demanding from us who were never part of the process, were never informed, were never asked or consulted, seems to be excessive. And your continuous statement about this council being more transparent and not being so, and that this means that this must happen, we have to be transparent under the law. We are not outside that law. We work within a framework, and the framework limits what we can and cannot do. It would be terrific if we had the authority to be completely open with everything always. I would propose that, but we don't have it. We work under rules and regulations, and those rules and regulations state we cannot make a third party give answers to our questions. We have to ask them, and I think this amendment attempts to do that and put it in a context which works. So I hope you will change your mind. I hope you will reconsider what your part you played over the last 4 years and attempt to try and be open and transparent with us about what went wrong during that cabinet period, what went wrong with the council, and just tell us all what conversations took place. Thank you.
Councillor Colling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to everyone who's contributed. I think we're in danger of violently agreeing with ourselves. So we are all agreed that some of our businesses are unhappy. We are agreed that processes could have been, perhaps, I hate to say the word, more transparent. My amendment proposes that Scarborough Borough Council has an investigation of its own role in that, and as Councillor Cockrell very eloquently described, we did provide information to the bid company and vice versa, and that because we cannot require and insist, we have no legal basis, no power or authority over the DBID company, we urge the DBID company as was and the Yorkshire Coast company as is to work with us on ensuring we have as full as possible answers to those questions. I would like to move my amendment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cockrell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Will Councillor Collin add my amendment to your amendment to your amendment?
Okay. So we vote on... I think we should vote on Councillor Collins' amendment, and at least we will have been on the first step, because the more that we're going on like this, I don't think any of us know what's going on. So we will vote. No, we will vote on your amendment. Councillor Mortimer.
Apologies. I've listened to quite a few amendments, propositions, amendments of amendments, and I'm getting slightly lost here.
Good,
because one that was said was that we stopped getting the levy in as a council from what I understand, that was mentioned. And from what I understand it, when we discussed it before, that actually is illegal. And I just want to, we do need to look into what has happened. We do need to understand the process and what has gone wrong with it. And I think we all agree with that. Is to ensure that we do have a smooth running of where we get the information from, how we get the information, and what we do with it. But I really want to know, that because one of the amendments was to stop collecting the levy. Now, I'm just wanting to know, one, is that legal?
Could I actually go back on what I said and say to you, would you read out your amendment?
I will indeed. So it's to delete the last 7 words in Councillor Abbott's amendment, i.e. legitimacy of the Yorkshire Coast bid ballot, and insert the role of Scarborough Borough Council in carrying out the D-bid ballot, and the SBC urges the Yorkshire Coast Bid Company to fully participate in that investigation. And I hope that clarifies. I wasn't aware that was a formal amendment moved and that would need a ruling.
So, Councillor Backhouse.
Madam Mayor, thank you for allowing me to stand at this late stage. We've had a lot of comments, and one of the things that I believe you said twice, Councillor Colling, is that there is now the Yorkshire Coast DB Company, but before that there was a DB body before setting up the company, and yet your motion excludes that. So therefore there's still an incompleteness within your amendment to the motion. If we are asked as a council to look at ourselves and our processes, we need to ensure we request, require, ask, however you wish to word that legally, the third party who were initially engaged in the process prior to the Yorkshire Coast D-bid company being formulated. It has to be within there to request of both. So could we please suggest that there is a slight rewording of that to square the circle, as we say?
Councillor Collins.
It's not that I disagree with you. I've got a process problem. Don't we need to vote on my amendment? And then if my amendment becomes a substantive motion, then Councillor Backhouse, you can amend it to include the DB company as was, and anyone else can amend it. But at the moment, it's an amendment. Yeah.
We are going to vote on your amendment, okay? So we've all heard Councillor Collins' amendment. All in favour? Okay. Against? Okay. Abstentions? Any? 1. Thank you. So that was carried. So if I've got it right, it could be that there might be an amendment to the amendment, right? That is amended and carried. So would you like to speak?
Thank you for that. Yes, Councillor Backhouse, I would be very pleased to accept your amendment and to insert that SBC urges the Yorkshire Coast Bid Company and its predecessor, the D-Bid Company, to fully participate in that investigation. I hope that's acceptable and you'll second that.
Vote on that as well. Councillor Cockrell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Mortimer raised a point about the legality of the suggested amendment I was putting forward. Could we have a ruling, please?
Madam Mayor, thank you. It would not be lawful for the Council to suspend collection of the levy at this time.
Councillor Donoghue Moncrief.
Sorry, I just wondered, does the amendment that Councillor Backhouse proposed need to include Mosaic as well? Because in effect they were part of it.
We've dealt with that motion. So we're happy with the acceptance of your amendment, and it will be up to you to organise the amendment that Andrew has put forward. Do you want to speak on that?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, it's just to clarify where we are. The motion has been voted on and the amendment has been accepted. Therefore, the motion has been dispensed with. What I'm suggesting to Councillor Colling, and listening to what members are saying about that proposed wording, is that that is included within the terms of reference for any investigation, and that should be taken separately because the motion has now been dispensed with and dealt with.
Where do we go from there?
Thank you, I think.
So have we that was so confusing, and I've got to say that we did have a presentation before this meeting about the DBID, and they gave an awful lot of information, and it is a great shame that not everybody was there. So we move on to item 7, and to receive a statement by the leader.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, don't we need to vote on the bits that we add on to the amendment to agree that on the terms of reference, so that it's Mosaic and it's the 2 other companies, we ask them and whatever, so that we have the terms of reference and where it goes to before we actually finish with this, because I really want to understand where we are, what we're doing, because I want transparency here about the way forward, because I agree that we need to look into this and what's happened. But we need that. We actually need it limiting about what we're doing and how we're following this up.
Right. Councillor Colling, will you agree to include that in your terms of reference?
Sorry, Madam Mayor. I've agreed to include Councillor Backhouse's suggestion into my what is now substantive motion.
Thank you.